So something big is definitely brewing at OpenAI right now, and I'm pretty sure it points to what comes next after GPT-4o, and maybe even to GPT-6, so we definitely need to talk about it. Now let's start with how this whole thing actually began, because it didn't come from some giant keynote or polished teaser trailer. It started with a small post on X. On March 8th, Adi Eleti from OpenAI's voice team asked people what they want to see in the new Omni model. On its own, that would have been an interesting little tease, but then other OpenAI employees started chiming in too. Brandon McKenzie, who works at OpenAI and has a multimodal background from Apple, replied that a new Omni model sounded like a great idea, and then the Decoder reported that these posts were adding fuel to speculation that OpenAI is working on a successor to GPT-4o. And once multiple people inside the company start nudging in the same direction, it stops feeling like random noise. Now, that matters because GPT-4o was supposed to be OpenAI's big Omni moment. OpenAI introduced GPT-4o in May 2024 as a model that could reason across text, vision, and audio in real time. The whole idea behind the O was Omni, one model that could handle different types of input together instead of acting like a pile of separate tools stitched together behind the scene. This was the promise, and at the time, it sounded like the beginning of a much more natural kind of AI. But here's the thing, for a lot of people, GPT-4o never fully lived up to that original promise. Some of the capabilities shown in the demos took time to roll out, and some users felt the real product never quite matched how fluid and seamless the launch made it look. This is why these new hints matter. People have been waiting for OpenAI to deliver the version of multimodal AI that actually feels complete, not just technically impressive in a demo, but genuinely natural in everyday use. And if you're wondering what a true Omni model would actually mean, think about it like this. Right now, we can already type to AI, speak to it, and show it images. But that doesn't automatically mean everything is being processed as one unified stream of understanding. A real Omni system would feel less like separate input modes and more like one intelligence taking everything in at once. Your voice, the image you're pointing at, the text on your screen, maybe a video too, all flowing through the same brain in real time. That's the version people have been imagining ever since GPT-4o was announced. And this gets more interesting when you pair it with where OpenAI seems to be heading overall, because the company is clearly not just trying to make a chatbot answer questions better, it's pushing towards systems that can see, hear, respond, and eventually act in a much more fluid way. So if a new Omni model really is coming, this isn't just another model update. It could be a foundational piece of a much higher and larger shift in how OpenAI wants people to interact with AI. Now, another massive part of this puzzle is voice, because even today, talking to AI still has one obvious problem. It often feels awkward, and the reason is actually pretty simple. Most current voice systems are still basically turn-based. You talk, then stop, then the model processes what you said, and then it responds. It's functional, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel natural. You make a small sound while it's talking, like yeah, right, or uh-huh, and it can treat that as an interruption and stop dead in the middle of the sentence. It breaks the rhythm instantly. Now that's why the reported bidirectional audio work matters so much, because according to reporting highlighted by the Decoder from the information, OpenAI is working on a bidirectional voice model meant to process both sides of the conversation in a more continuous way. Instead of treating every exchange like a strict back and forth, the goal is to make it behave more like an actual human conversation where reactions, overlaps, and interruptions don't completely wreck the flow. This is a much bigger deal than it sounds, because the moment voice AI stops feeling like a walkie-talkie and starts feeling like a conversation, the entire product changes. Now, apparently that system is still not perfect. The reporting suggests that OpenAI has a prototype, but it can still become unstable after a few minutes, which is exactly the kind of thing that can delay a launch. So this is definitely not one of those situations where it's all neatly packed and ready to go. It sounds more like something real is in development, but it still needs work before OpenAI can ship it at the level it wants. But the reason this matters goes way beyond just making ChatGPT sound more human. The voice is one of the biggest ways AI can reach people who are never going to sit there typing prompts into a chat box all day. Talking is more natural than typing for most people, and if OpenAI can make AI feel genuinely conversational, that massively broadens who can use it and how often they'll use it. It also has huge business implications. Customer support, scheduling, retail, travel, banking, call centers, all of those industries want AI voice systems, but right now the experience still breaks down too easily the second a conversation goes slightly off script. A better bidirectional voice system would make that much more practical. Now let's zoom out, because the Omni model and the voice model don't exist in a vacuum. They only make full sense when you look at what OpenAI is doing on the hardware side too. Reuters reported in February 2026 that OpenAI has more than 200 people working on a family of AI-powered devices, including a smart speaker and possibly smart glasses and even a smart lamp, based on reporting from the information. That alone tells you OpenAI is thinking far beyond a browser tab. And once you start thinking about hardware, suddenly the Omni model becomes much more important, because if you want AI living in devices around you, those devices can't rely on clunky, fragmented interaction. A speaker with a camera, smart glasses, or some future variable all need the same thing: an AI that can hear naturally, understand context, and respond in real time. Without that, the hardware is just another overhyped gadget. With it, the hardware actually becomes useful, and that's the difference between a gimmick and a product people live with every day. And that's why all of this also keeps getting tied back to GPT-6, not because OpenAI has formally laid out every detail, and not because there's some official release schedule sitting on the website, but because the infrastructure is getting much bigger. In October 2025, AMD and OpenAI announced a strategic partnership to deploy 6 gigawatts of AMD GPU compute, with the first gigawatt expected to start coming online in the second half of 2026. That is a serious amount of infrastructure. Now, it doesn't prove exactly when GPT-6 arrives, but it absolutely shows OpenAI is preparing for a much larger compute future. So when people connect the dots here, the logic is not that crazy. You've got employees hinting at a new Omni model, you've got reporting about improved bidirectional voice, you've got a growing hardware effort, you've got major compute expansion. These are not isolated developments, they all point to the same direction. OpenAI moving towards a more unified AI system that isn't just smarter on the benchmarks, but more present, more conversational, and more embedded in actual devices. And if that really is where this is heading, then the bigger story is not just OpenAI is building GPT-6, the bigger story is that OpenAI seems to be building layers of the same system. The Omni model is the perception layer, the eyes, ears, and multimodal understanding. The bidirectional voice model is the conversation layer, the part that makes interaction feel fluid instead of robotic, and whatever the next major GPT system is, that becomes the intelligence layer tying everything together. Once you look at it like that, this stops sounding like a random leak and starts looking like a roadmap. And then there's the hardware question, which is where this gets even more interesting, because we've already seen AI gadgets try to sell the post-smartphone dream and fail. Humane flopped, Rabbit R1 didn't become the breakthrough people thought it might, so why would OpenAI be different? Well, one obvious reason is distribution. OpenAI is not some tiny company trying to convince people to care about brand new ecosystems from scratch. It already has massive user reach through ChatGPT. So if it eventually puts that AI into earbuds, speakers, glasses, or some pocket device, it's not asking people to adopt a completely unfamiliar platform. It's plugging new hardware into something people already use. That gives it a much better shot than most other AI hardware attempts we've seen so far. And that's likely the key point here. I don't think this is just a random employee chatter that people are overreacting to. I think we're seeing the outlines of OpenAI's next phase, a stronger Omni model, a more natural voice system, more serious hardware, more infrastructure, and a clear push towards AI that doesn't just sit in a tab waiting for you to open it, but starts becoming something more ambient, something that can follow you across devices and fit more naturally into everyday life. Whether all of that lands under the name GPT-6 or gets rolled out in pieces before then, the direction is getting pretty hard to ignore.